I want to say thank you so much for making the time to join this learning community conversation. I will let you know that this has been a conversation that's actually been around for some time. This is the first time we're offering it online to the general public through our ATTC. So I really want to thank you for making the time to be here. And some of this content, if you've participated in the wellness communities, some of this content will be familiar to you because in some ways it is a reminder about your well-being and your self-care specifically. And we'll get into that in a little more detail as we go forward. My name is Paul. I want to again say welcome and welcome back for those of you who I've had the opportunity to be within the learning community before. I am currently a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, also fortunate to be a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer for the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center. Social worker by training, started providing direct services in 19. Crystal, you will get a certificate not directly after, in about a week. Everybody will get a certificate who completes the full conversation for 2 hours of credentialing credit, as well as the slide deck for you to share and use in any way you want. Began providing social service, direct service care in 1991 until about 2003, when I transferred specifically into focusing on workforce development, particularly with the substance use services branch of social services. Very, very excited to have the opportunity to focus this particular learning community conversation specifically in a particular way for managers and supervisors. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do, and thank you for the blessings, Marietta, blessings back to you as well. Want to ask everybody to clarify in the chat, are you currently a manager or a supervisor or both? So you can type M, S, or B for both. And if you're unsure or you're not that, you can type U or N for not, and U for unsure. Okay, so it looks like a lot of folks are supervisors, sort of, okay. Not yet, but moving in that direction, okay. Excellent. I just wanted to get a sense of that because I do want to acknowledge here, not yet Nova, but working toward it, I presume. I want to acknowledge that this particular conversation is intentionally centering managers and supervisors, suggesting that you're focusing on your well-being and your self-care. And additionally, we're also going to explore kind of a way of communicating with those we manage or supervise that may actually lessen your stress. So I want to propose this particular way of communicating with supervisees, and it may seem very familiar to many of you in this learning community. And again, this is to intentionally put this suggested method of communication onto your radar for refinement if you're already doing it, and for addition if you think it may work for your particular supervisory dialogue or managerial dialogue. Okay? So again, compassion fatigue is real for supervisors and managers. Again, the emphasis on acting to prevent it if you can, and also to manage it if it is indeed there. And being very clear, folks, not just compassion fatigue, also burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. I'm going to share my slides again. I'm feeling a little more confident now that they're working. Excellent. Be a learning community together for this little less than 2 hours now. As a learning community, as is my standard invitation, please do consider using language that is respectful, welcoming, and inclusive of everyone's presence and experience in this kind of hybrid of a wellness community centering managers and supervisors, in addition to being a learning environment. Because this is meant to be our learning community, our wellness community conversation, what we talk about may not officially reflect the position of our funder, and that's okay, because our funder wants this to be useful and beneficial to you. Welcome back. If you have not yet done so, there are 42 of us in the learning community. If you have not yet done so, please type your full first and last name and where you're from in the chat. If you're sharing your computer with somebody, do the same with their first and last name and where they're from. There will be a brief evaluation at the conclusion of this conversation. And again, my hope, and I'm not always successful, as you know, but my hope is that I'll be able to leave a little bit of time at the end for you to be able to complete the evaluation and then move on to your next appointment. If you can be on camera, if it works for your particular setting or equipment or learning style, please turn your camera on and be on camera for the entire conversation. If you need to step away, just send me a direct message and let me know you'll be right back. If for whatever reason you're not going to be on camera today, again, there are 42 of us. If you're not going to be on camera today, please do send me a direct message. You don't need to send it to everybody. Just send it to me, a direct message, just letting me know you're not going to be on camera. And don't let that inhibit you from participating by unmuting or participating in the chat. Speaking of muting, because there are 42 of us, I would ask that until you want to comment, share information, react, if you wouldn't mind remaining muted, do not hesitate to interrupt me if I'm in the middle of something. If you want to share some information, if you want to ask a question, if you want to react, interrupt me. I welcome it, as many of you know, and as many of you have experienced. So, and for those of you who may be new to the learning community, I welcome it. What I would ask, though, is that if one of our other colleagues in the learning community has the floor and they're making their point, please don't interrupt them. Let them finish. Let's give them the respect of being heard uninterrupted within this space. And then the final guideline I would ask is if people would be willing to speak from the I. I believe this. I know this to be true. These are my values. This is what I feel. So I'm going to advance this to our goals, which I think are fairly self-explanatory, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute because I feel confident that I can, and just ask, can everybody agree to those guidelines as stated, that will be the way that we'll interact with each other? Excellent. Thank you, Ebony. Thank you, Alexine. Thank you, Matt. Oh, thank you. Excellent. Very good. All right. So it looks like pretty much everybody's on board with that. Very good. Very good. Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen again. We'll quickly cover the goals and the learning objectives. And again, I will ask you to be thinking any thoughts, reactions, or questions to the express focus of this particular learning community today. And again, folks, thank you for your confirmation in the chat. Greatly appreciated. And for those of you who sent me direct messages about your camera, thank you, greatly appreciated. I'm really glad you're here. And again, if at any point that changes and you can go on camera or you want to go on camera, please feel free to do so. All right, I'm going to share the screen again. I don't want to get too confident with this screen sharing because Zoom could betray me at any moment, I guess. So in essence, folks, we have three primary goals in this admittedly brief amount of time. First and foremost, to just acknowledge and increase awareness, although you may be acutely and personally aware of this, but just to further raise that awareness about the fact that managers and supervisors additionally, and sometimes even more intensely, experience burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. Also, as many of you may recall, if you've ever attended any of the wellness conversations, wellness learning communities, support communities, we do touch on this model called the stress cycle and the evidence-based, very commonly known strategies to manage stress. There's not going to be anything new there, whether you've attended that learning community conversation or not. There's not going to be anything new there that you haven't already heard as a strategy for managing stress. And I will tell you, because oftentimes this is what jumps into my head when people say activities to manage your wellness or your well-being. I often think of somebody saying to me, which I don't like being told what to do, where they might say, if you take a bubble bath, that may, that doesn't work for me. It may work for you. And if it does, that's great. It just doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me, and being told what I should do doesn't work for me. So please keep in mind that as we discuss these things, take what you like and leave the rest. I'm not here to tell you what you should or should not be doing. I wouldn't presume that, and I certainly respect your autonomy. The other element that I really, really wanted to focus on here is I've tried to put together several elements that compose a method of how to actually communicate with those you manage and supervise in a way that can potentially, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed here, potentially decrease your stress as well, and possibly improve that managerial or supervisory alliance that you have with your colleagues. And I'll be very curious as to see what your reactions are to this sort of opportunity or composed method of communication. To that end, we have these 4 learning objectives. Again, I think they speak pretty clearly for themselves. And I do want to acknowledge that one of the things we are going to focus on a little bit, and I'm going to direct your attention to the bottom one, number 4, is, and I'll read it out loud for those of you who that may benefit, list a minimum of 2 reasons to avoid acting out unmanaged stress. So we'll say more about that when we get to that particular point. I guess the reason that I wanted to put this in the learning objectives is I wanted to make it very real, and you may agree or disagree with this, and both reactions, thoughts are welcome in addition to anything in between. What I do want to put on the table and raise awareness about is that if I'm not managing my own stress as a manager or supervisor, I could potentially be triggered to act that out within the frame of the managerial or supervisory alliance. So I just wanted to put that on the table as something for us to discuss as well. Before we get to these terms, I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Excellent. Antonio, wonderful. I'm so glad you joined us today. Welcome back. And Nova, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate your direct message. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm just going to open the floor up to hear thoughts, reactions, questions to this focus specifically on managers and supervisors. Again, everybody is welcome. We're centering managers and supervisors in this conversation. So any thoughts, comments, reactions, or questions in regard to that? Floor is open. You can unmute and comment on that, and I'll stop talking so you can do that, or you can interrupt me if you want to practice that. And you can also put anything in the chat that you might want to put in the chat. So any thoughts, comments, reactions, or questions? I'm going to check the chat to see if anybody's putting anything in the chat about thoughts, reactions, or questions about focusing on supervisors and managers.
I just want to say, like, there's a parallel process. If a manager or supervisor has, like, extra stress that they're bringing to the table, then it just gets put on to, fellow coworkers or people that they supervise, and then that does a domino effect to the people, they may support, and all in all, it becomes a very unhealthy situation. Just something to be really mindful of, and sometimes it's not always taken into consideration.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you mentioning that parallel process, Paula, and the image of the domino effect, because I'm going to make a statement and tell me what you think about this, Paula, whether you agree or disagree or whatever. But I will go so far out on a limb as to say that the relationship the manager or the supervisor has with their supervisee has a direct impact on how they provide care or services to the people that they serve.
100%, because then, there's no resentment from the supervisee to the supervisor. And if the supervisee needs to get extra additional support or help, assistance, etc., from that supervisor, they may not be willing to do so because they don't want to deal with that person's, extra.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Paula, I often say to folks in the learning community, like, you shouldn't play poker because your face like betrays things. I would say to you, you should play poker because because when I posed that question, I had no idea what you were going to say. You gave absolutely no indication, and when you said 100%, I was really surprised.
Well, good.
Thank you so much for starting us off, Paula. Thank you. Andrea, I saw that you were kind of nodding your head when Paula said that. Did you have any reaction to what she said? You can pass if you don't want to comment, but I did see you have a reaction. So you shouldn't play poker, but
No, you're exactly right in that. I should not play poker. I'm very expressive. No, I support what she said. I don't know that I have anything significant to add right now.
okay. Okay, but you were in alignment with it. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. All right. There are a couple of things, or one thing I think came in the chat, but again, anybody who wants to unmute. Carl writes, is this like an airline orientation? Oh, Carl, absolutely. Carl, if I could, I'd give you a fist bump, not a punch, but a fist bump. Because you're going to be an expert in a slide that's coming up in just a moment, Carl. So stay on board, so to speak, in regard to that. Carl is absolutely right. That's the essence of this centering. Jojine writes, I found that employee to employee personality piece is hard. Like I'm a playground, like I'm a playground manager rather than just a program success manager / CEO. So human resources is exhausting. Andrea agrees with that too. In addition to a few other people too, I saw nodding their heads. You're not alone. Any other thoughts or reactions, folks, as we sort of move into this that you'd like to verbalize or put in the chat? Yeah, go ahead, Antonio, please. The floor is yours.
First of all, Grand Rising, Grand Rising. You know, for managers and supervisors, it's a dangerous hat to wear if you're not emotionally regulated on a daily basis, because you never know what's going to come across your table.
Okay.
Right. Also, I'm a manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a boss too. And a lot of times they expect me to pull a rabbit out of the hat, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to be accessible, be able to work on the fly. Just the other day, I had to encounter a situation where everyone decided that they were sick that day, right?
Mm,
So I had to manage the building. I had to open the building. I had to wait for everybody to leave so I can close the building up. And anything that happens, deliveries, anything that comes across the table, I have to be ready for it. Now, mind you, I have my own personal work that I has to get done within 72 hours, right?
right.
So it's a lot, but also, you know, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I just believe that when you in those roles, you really got to know what you're stepping into. I wouldn't advise anyone to take on a manager or a supervisor role unless you have some training on it.
Antonio, thank you. And you know, if it's okay, Antonio, I would like to ask you a follow-up question before I propose a challenge to the entire learning community. But if it's okay, could I ask you a follow-up question?
Okay.
You you used a word that really vibrated with me in a positive, accurate sort of way, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit. You said, if I heard you correctly, you said it's dangerous to put on that supervisory manager hat if you're not emotionally regulated. And I'm wondering if you'd say a little bit more about the word, your framing of the word dangerous, because something about that spoke to me as well. And I'd like to hear your further thoughts on that, if you'd be willing to share them.
Well, from my eyes, from my point of view,
Yeah.
professionalism is key, right?
Okay.
That professionalism means I don't have to like you, but I got to respect you. I don't have to I got to see what's best for the agency, what's best for the profession, what's best for the client. There's a lot of ethics involved when you're taking on a responsibility as a supervisor or a manager, right? Because as you go down, the ship goes down too, you
Mm.
know, and there will be repercussions behind that because I remember one time this young kid came in and his mom and dad were arguing and they were in the parking lot and they paid no attention to their child, and the child walked in and I was having a session. I was facilitating a anger management session, and the child came in the lobby and pulled the fire drill, pulled the fire alarm,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And
Wow.
everyone's upstairs in class, and we just heard the alarm, and I'm like, oh no. So I had to go downstairs and try to figure out who's his parents. Now they were supposed to be in my class, but they were so caught up in each other's
Mm,
stuff that they in the car arguing with each other,
mm,
right? And one's my client and one's my colleague's client, and they just didn't know what happened, man. So I had to fill out an incident report and send it off to the director. And these are, I hope I'm answering your question correctly. When I mean emotionally regulated, man, you got to be good with yourself. If you're not good with yourself, man, those kind of things that you encounter on a daily basis as representing a job as in a supervisor or manager role, you might go off on somebody. You might bite somebody head off, whether it's a colleague or a client or just a
yeah.
complete stranger. And you got
Yeah.
to know how to think before you react. Don't just react. You have to use your God-given ability, common sense. Sometimes common sense, oh man, you got to know how. So that's what I learned. I learned through this process because I work a lot sometimes, like on the weekends, and it's low staff, and I have to be mindful of what's around me. My awareness has to be on point. If my awareness is not on point, I might drop the ball. So that's what I've learned from being a manager, man. That, you know, and it's also I have to look at the greater good of my staff, the people that come to
Mhm,
me and come knocking on my door or ask me questions. I have to make myself available for them and not
mhm,
disrespect them in the process of them bothering me.
mm. Thank you for elaborating, Antonio. Greatly appreciated. This is the challenge to everybody in the learning community. If you know the name of the play that Anthony quoted from, Heavy is the Head That Wears the Crown, if you know the play, type it in the chat. I have an idea. I could be wrong. So if you know the name, type it in the chat. Is That's what I was thinking, Paula. I was thinking that, but Antonio will let us know. Um, and we're open to other options too. Okay, possibly King Lear too. Yeah. So, any other thoughts about the centering managers, supervisors, in addition to everything else that's been said so far? Anybody want to add anything else? Macbeth, okay. If you hang around till the end of the 2 hours, maybe we'll figure out which play that was. Excellent. All right. I was looking for a hook to keep you present. Excellent. So folks, oh yeah, could be. Yeah. Love it. I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to share 3 very familiar words with you. And I'm going to just share a couple of words about these words. And for those of you, again, who've been in the wellness community, these will be very familiar to you because these are ever-present possibilities and sometimes present realities. Paula, we may have been incorrect. It may be a different play. Burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. Now, I want to put those on the table because, and I'm thinking of what Antonio was saying. As Antonio was talking, I kept getting this image of him juggling like 14 different balls all at the same time. And oftentimes that's what, okay, Carl, thank you. Carl has gone to the source, and I don't mean William Shakespeare, but he's gone to the source. Carl, thank you very much. Remember, stay on board. We're going to need you very shortly for the plane reference. The fact that you are holding and responsible and representing all of these things simultaneously can intensify the likelihood of your experience of burnout, your potential experience of compassion fatigue. And I was also thinking of what you said, Antonio, about a supervisee or someone that you manage needing your attention and wanting your attention while you're potentially responding to something else. There's a way not to deal with that, and there's a way to deal with that. And maybe, one of the positive ways of dealing with it is saying, Alexine, right now is actually not the best time, but can we make an appointment to speak at another time? And keep in mind that that expression of either compassion fatigue or burnout is verbal as well as nonverbal. It's your face, your body, how you say things. All of that is communicating, and all of it's being received. And then the sort of underlining piece of that is that these 2 first elements can actually grow into or manifest as vicarious trauma. And vicarious trauma is serious in terms of it means that there's a lot going on with you. It also is serious because it can turn into somatic or physical symptoms. It can turn into severe attitude changes. And it can change your worldview at work and outside of work. So just keeping that in mind in terms of these 3 related dynamics, that having the additional responsibilities of manager or supervisor, not only are you experiencing what you're experiencing, you're bearing witness and offering support for what your supervisees are experiencing. And to Paula's earlier point about that parallel process. So any thoughts, reactions, or comments about burnout, compassion fatigue, or vicarious trauma? Anybody want to say anything about that or write anything about that? And I'm watching the chat and I'm watching the faces I can see. Yes, Ebony, we'll go to you and then we'll go to Antonio. The floor is yours, Ebony.
So, when it comes to like compassion, I'm currently doing an internship for the core program at my agency, which stands for Community Oriented Recovery Empowerment. So basically, we do like, I have to help motivate and empower my clients to pursue certain things based off of their service goals. And I've definitely come across some compassion fatigue with working with my clients, with the clients, because a lot of the times they come with a lot of like, they come with their trauma, they come with, their stories that, and sometimes even the service plan that we have like set up for them is not even addressed sometimes. We're not even working on the goals. They're just simply like the first question is like, well, how are you doing today? And then it'll just turn into and that, hearing that, knowing that I can use like my motivational interviewing skills to get them to speak to me and they feel comfortable. I just can recall a day where I had 3 clients back to back and they were all just having a really bad week. And when I was done, I just remember just feeling like drained, like on the inside. Not because the work was hard, but because it's like, you're taking in everything that they're saying and it's like, wow, will I even be able to help them properly? How do I even deal with something this deep? All of these things are running through my head. So like I've definitely experienced like that form of compassion fatigue when dealing with my clients. So I don't know if anybody else can relate to that or resonate with that, but that's definitely been something I've experienced before.
Ebony, thank you so much. And I saw a couple of people nodding their head you got some applause too when you said, can anybody else identify with that? And there's a particular word I want to underline that Ebony said, which I think is really very accurate, Ebony, in terms of the way you put it. You said, after taking all of that in, because let's face it, folks, you are taking all of that in. Now, you can manage it, but you're taking it in. And to your point, Ebony, it definitely has an impact. And before we go to Antonio, I just want to underline one other thing that I really appreciate that Ebony kind of acknowledged in what she said. And that is that when you're taking all of that in, and compassion fatigue may develop, it doesn't mean you're a bad worker or supervisor or manager. It means that you're reactively trying to protect yourself and that your gas tank is empty. Meaning you can't bring any more compassion to the table, because if you do, you're going to get more of what you maybe can't take in at that moment. And again, a final point, Ebony, to your insight into this is that, and you didn't use this word, I don't think, but you certainly said it, and I'm glad you said it. We all have limits. There are limits, and our limits protect us. They are not bad. They don't mean we're not professional. They're simply to be paid attention to and responded to so we can maintain that professionalism that Antonio was talking about before. And Antonio, I'm going to hand you the floor, and then we can all look at what Carl wrote in the chat. Go ahead, Antonio, please.
Yeah, I love what both of you said, but I think the hidden cost behind compassion fatigue changes how my power is used, right, in that supervisor or that manager role. Because compassion fatigue or leadership often shifts, right, when empathy now becomes irritation, or curiosity becomes judgment, or my guidance now turns into control, or me being flexible, no longer am I flexible. I'm rigid, so I see all those things as unchecked compassion fatigue. I'll start to micromanage, You know, I'll start to emotionally distance myself from my position and the people that rely on me on a daily basis, you know, and or I'll be over reliant on the policy instead of discernment, which discernment is knowing how to, like, I got to know how to pick my fruit like I do at, you know, choose wisely. I got to pick my fruit and vegetables, you know, like when you go to the store, you can't just think that first, you know, you have to be very aware of what's going on. I don't have to have the response immediately right now for the situation. Does that make sense? I
does.
hope it does. Because
It
what I've learned is good leaders through passion fatigue, they become unsafe leaders without even meaning to be that way or act that way.
Right. Yes. Yeah, because your point's well taken. That's not their intention. And again, I love Antonio's insight into this because, and you said this so clearly, that unexamined or unconscious compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, burnout will change the way you supervise. And Antonio gave really concrete examples. And again, I'm going to just name one of them. And he gave many, which were right on the money. But where your curiosity about what's going on with who you manage and you supervise turns into judgment, or it turns into criticism. And again, we simply want to raise our awareness in regard to this so that we can appropriately adjust and take care of what we may need to get back on track. Carl wrote in the chat, the way you deal with it contributes to the culture of the organization and will contribute to establishing relationships between and among the staff and clients. Absolutely, Carl. Absolutely. Is there anything do you want to elaborate on that at all, or do you want to drop the mic and let it stand? But feel free to elaborate if you'd like.
Well, I think the key point I'm trying to make there is that it's not the one-off. It's not just how you deal with a particular situation. I mean, you can go on vacation and the pattern of the way you've dealt with things stays behind and will color the way the organization operates internally and externally, and even when you're not present.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's almost like this indelible mark that you can make that can have significant impacts. Okay, excellent. I'm going to share my screen again. If anybody has anything else they want to add or say at this particular point while I'm sharing my screen, unmute and interrupt me, please. So feel free to do that if you want to comment or react, or if you want to say more about what we've just been saying. All righty, let me just get the slide. Excellent. So, Carl, I believe this is your moment. There are two words that I've left out. Or yeah, it's two words. The slide is a little, that one separate sort of underline should be down at the bottom there, but we'll fix that. But put on your first before helping those around you. If you know what the words are that are supposed to be there are, please put them in the chat. And yes, thank you. And oh, not to worry about the slide at all. That's a really easy fix. I didn't even notice it when I reviewed it. So thank you, Tree. Thanks so much. Yes, oxygen mask. And I would like everybody in this learning community to please type oxygen mask, or if you'd rather just keep it shorthand, OM in the chat. I'd like everybody to type that in the chat, and I'm going to invite Carl, since he put this on the table first, his insight read right into this. Carl, I'm going to invite you, if you're willing, to unmute and please read the whole statement with the two words. And you can even do it if you want as if you were on a plane, but that's up to you.
Well, I don't know about the on the plane part, but put on your oxygen mask first before helping those around you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Excellent. You would inspire me to put mine on first. Now I have to ask you a question. And this is you can respond to this verbally if you want to. You can put it in the chat. I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you'd unbuckle from your seat and you'd get up and start putting oxygen masks on everybody else until you fell into the aisle. Or 10, you would put your oxygen mask first and then help the people you could help around you. Which of those would be easier for you? And again, which would you feel you could actually do? And you can put it in the chat, or you're more than welcome to unmute and say why you give yourself the number that you're choosing. And this is, again, for you to reflect for yourself. There's no criticism or judgment about whatever number you give yourself. So if anybody wants to unmute and say their number and say why they gave themselves that number, the floor is certainly open. And for all of you who've put your numbers in the chat already, thank you. Greatly appreciated. Let's try and get 48 numbers. Yeah, and Ariel, you're making a really interesting distinction. Easier to do 10, but what you normally would do would be 1. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you want to say anything about that, or if maybe Andrea or Dana want to say anything about that, because they seemed to identify with it.
I can jump in really quickly.
Go ahead, Dana.
I put an 8 because I think at this stage in my life I've addressed enough codependency issues to know and do better, but there's still room for like human error and you know, not always choosing myself first.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Andrea, do you want to add anything to that? About you? No? No? You can say no. It's okay. Okay. Yeah, fine. Okay. Okay. Naracia, am I saying that right? Yes, kind of. You'll let me know.
Is Nyrasia or Nye? I can change it to Nye.
No, whatever.
Easier to pronounce.
Nyrasia.
Yes.
Do I have it?
Yes, you got it.
Fantastic. Go ahead. Thank you. And thank you for clarifying for me. Would you be willing to elaborate on what you wrote in the chat, Nyrasia?
Yes, I'm going to do the best that I can because I just got a notification that my computer is going to die. So I'm going to quickly elaborate so that I don't get signed off. But
Sure.
I thought of it, what was easier. I'm like, okay, I want to say 10, but I know that my habits have shown that I revert to, helping other people before I help myself. So it must be easier for me to do that if I continuously do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nyrasia. Excellent. Any other thoughts about that in terms of your number and your reasons as to why you're at that particular number? Okay, it's fine. Just asking you to reflect on that for yourself. 1 is not better than 10. 10 is not better than 1. It's just looking at yourself. And again, I love the way Nyrasia put it, because what do your habits tell you? What does your track record tell you about who you put first? And I can't but help go back to what Antonio kind of started us off with, that self-regulation. That self-regulation aspect of it, and how critical that can be to management and to supervision. I'm going to go forward with the slides for a moment. All right. Excellent. So let me just make sure that this, yes, this is the next slide. So this particular dynamic has been discussed probably in the same depth I'm going to discuss it here. There is a model from a book about burnout where they talk about the completed stress cycle and a modern day stress cycle. And the essence of that, and I have a sort of a visual pictogram that will lay it out, but let me give you the essence of it before I share the pictograms with you. The essence of it is that prior to work constraints, some social considerations, oftentimes when human beings would have stressful experiences, there would be a number of opportunities and community-related opportunities for them to sort of manage and complete their stress cycle. With the two authors, it's actually two sisters, with the two authors of this book, and I believe it's called Burnout, Managing the Stress Cycle, but I'll get you the exact title because I have a copy of it. They suggest that because of the modern work environment, because of modern life, what ends up happening is this stress cycle, because of time pressures and a variety of other things, social conventions, does not get completed. And ultimately what happens, and it makes me think of another great book related to this, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with this book, it's called Waking the Tiger, which is it's a really powerful book that I would say really relates to this. If you're familiar with that book, Waking the Tiger, type an F in the chat if you're unfamiliar or you. I'm very curious to see if anybody in the learning community knows of that book. And I see 4 people have responded, so I'm just going to check before I show you this cycle. Okay, so it looks like a number of people are unfamiliar with it. Yeah, it's okay, all right. Ah, Candace, you're familiar with it. Okay, all right. Yeah, it's very much related to this idea, particularly in Waking the Tiger. The idea is that the incompleted stress cycle retains the physiological, biochemical stress within the frame of the body and the mind. So the completed stress cycle, simply stated, is there's a stressor or stressors. We have our physiological emotional reaction. One of our life-preserving impulses kicks in to rescue us from the stressor. In this case, it's flight, getting to safety, communicating the experience within the frame of a supportive community, and being able to move forward and release the physical and the emotionally energetic energy. And as I share this and I share the not completed stress cycle, I'm very curious to see if anybody has any thoughts or reactions to this model. If it sort of resonates, seems accurate or right, or if you're suspicious that it's not, it doesn't apply. So I'm very curious to see what your reaction is. I will make an I statement here. I have found often that this has been my experience, that I hold on to things until I'm aware that I'm holding on to them. And oftentimes my awareness is brought to me in not the most positive way. And I'm just making an I statement there, here. So the not completed stress cycle, there's that stressor again. It could be anything. We have that emotional or physiological reaction. Our impulse kicks in. Again, in this case, it's to flee. They can be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are those 4 primal responses that are activated in a whole different part of the brain. And I'll make another I statement here. Unfortunately, my, well, I'll let you guess. Of those four, I'm going to let you guess. Of those four responses, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, which one of those do you think would be my, and again, some of you, may have known me through learning communities and other opportunities that we've had to collaborate together. Others of you were meeting for the first time. What I'm going to ask, yeah, and Carl is noting the other reactions could be fight or freeze. There's also fawn. And I'm going to ask you, which one of these do you think would be my knee-jerk response if I was in a stressful situation? And it looks like Kate, Dana, Jogene, Matthew, and Andrea have all said fawn. Okay. All right. And we'll let other people weigh in. And if you stay until the end of the 2 hours, I will reveal what mine is. And more people fawn, Janet, Ariel. Okay, good. I appreciate that. I appreciate you considering that way. So there's that physical response, again, coupled with the emotional. And what ends up happening is that there are more than one stressors. The person is not able, in an incomplete cycle, the person is not able to act on their life-preserving impulse, and they do not get to a supportive community. Therefore, those red arrows build and pancake on top of each other, and their body holds more and more energetic, physical stress. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute, and I gave you a little bit of a preview of one of the evidence-based strategies. Again, as I said, they're not going to be anything new, but I'm just going to pause here for a second to ask, does anybody have any thoughts, reactions about how that completed or incompleted stress cycle may resonate for you? Do you find that it kind of explains anything? Matthew, you look very pensive. I want to open it up to see if you have any thought or reaction. You can pass if you don't want to say anything, but you did have a very serious look on your face there.
Mostly just focusing, but you really realize that our natural responses are not healthy, and so these have to be intentional. And just thinking about the fact that if we are not intentional about it, it is going to keep crashing down upon us. We're never going to have any sort of healthy resolution. And so, I love that word intentionality in so many areas of what I do and how I work with others, because otherwise we're going to crash.
Excellent. Matthew, thank you. And Matthew, I don't know if you would agree with this or not. And Jaime is saying that, yes, it definitely applies. I'm wondering if you would also think, along with intentionality, there's also awareness, self-aware. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with me adding that to intentionality? Yeah. Okay. Because I think it's hard to be intentional if you're not aware of the situation. Because then how do you intentionally choose what you're going to manage or not manage, or how you're going to respond? Yeah. Any other thoughts or reactions to those stress cycle models, the completed one, the incompleted one? And again, there's no right or wrong here, just asking if you have any other thoughts or reactions to them. Okay. So what I'm going to invite us to consider is, in this book, related to and in connection with those incompleted stress cycle, that compounding of the emotional and physical energy, there are strategies, activities that actually help to free up some of that energy and some of that stress that has been present. I'm just going to really move through these quite quickly because they are not anything that's going to be unfamiliar to anybody here. They are what you would common sense think, oh, these are the things you would do to manage stress. They're not anything new. Of course, it's our decision based on our own lives and our own interests if any of these really work or speak for us. Because I'm thinking of Paula as I say this, and look at that beautiful picture behind Paula that is just gorgeous. For me, it reminds me of an evidence-based strategy that really works for me. Two, actually, which is swimming and being out on a hike. That works for me. I know people that say being on a hike or swimming in a lake or a pond would be so stressful and anxiety producing for them for, whatever, many personal reasons, that is not something they would ever go near. What matters is what resonates or works for you. So there's no one right way. It's just being open to and moving toward what works for you. So just keeping that in mind, I'm going to share my slides and quickly just remind us all, in addition to what Paula's wonderful picture evokes in me, there's another one of these evidence-based strategies, which I will identify. I'll make an I statement that, and this will be no surprise to anybody here today, is an evidence-based strategy that really also personally works for me. And it has helped me to have that awareness. So I'm going to just briefly touch on them. And again, if anybody has any comments, questions, reactions, thoughts, information you want to add, don't hesitate to unmute at any particular moment. Let's move this incompleted stress cycle out of here for just a minute. And I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Okay, great. Good. Okay. So a couple of people suggested a different sort of primal impulse for me as well. And again, stay until the end, and I'll tell you which one I have found that has come up for me. So certainly physical activity. And again, you can probably see why Paula's beautiful picture made me think of this. Also, connection and positive social interactions. And let me add something here. And I'm adding this, again, based on my own experience working in HIV and AIDS for a little over 12 years. Connection and positive social interactions outside of my work environment. I had many positive and social connections when I worked in HIV and AIDS with the people that I worked with. And guess what we did while we were socializing? We talked about work. So again, and that was not helpful. So having space, those connections that don't have anything to do with work, can be very helpful. And again, they were helpful for me. What may work for you may be very different. Okay, so I have to admit it, this is one of the big ones for me. Laughter, feeling comfortable enough to laugh and have fun with the folks that I'm around at a particular moment. And I love this picture. I hope these three people are a real family. And if they're not, and they're models, and they have great chemistry. So my hope is they are a real family. But laughter really is very healing for me. And there are times when I will purposefully connect with people that I know make me laugh and help me to kind of let go of the big rock I might be carrying at any particular moment. Sleep, meditation, and rest. And, most people say, yeah, wouldn't it be great if I had the time to do that? And that is true, because we have lives at work, we have lives outside of work, we have lives in other communities and situations that require our attention and energies. What I will say though, and I'm speaking to the choir in saying this, that interruptions or inabilities or inability to sleep or rest or having intrusive thoughts if you meditated before can be signs that there is something else possibly needed and that there's something going on. Creative expression. And again, some people would see, you know, paintbrushes and paint as like, oh my God, I'm in heaven. Other people might see that as, oh God, don't, you know, it brings back, and I'm very serious about this, it can bring back traumatic memories for some folks. So again, creative expression in the way, and if that works for you. Affection with other people, with beloved creatures that maybe share our space that we care for, and sometimes a cry. Sometimes tears can be very freeing of held stress. I recall working with folks who used to say to me, you know, after a really tough day, I know the movie that I need to watch because it's going to give me the opportunity. Also, thinking of tears, they can also be a sign of significant distress. So being aware of, are these healing and cathartic tears, or are these literally, and I don't think it's inaccurate to put it this way, that they're a cry for help, they're tears that require further support and attention. So I'm going to ask you to look at these particular bullets: manager, supervisor goals. And I'm just going to ask you to look at these particular bullets, and I'm going to ask, is there any one of these that stands out to you as the most significant or the most important, if you want to use that word, the most significant or important particular goals of a manager or a supervisor? And again, we can just, you know, say that the first bullet is 1, the second bullet is 2, third bullet is 3, fourth bullet is 4, and there could be more bullets that should be here too. So certainly if you have thoughts about that, don't hesitate to unmute and say that. But I'm going to ask, of these 4, is there anyone that you think is most important for a supervisor or a manager? And if you do, why do you think it's the most important? So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And again, we can say that bullet number 1 is, and I can show them again if you need to see them. Bullet number 1 is 1, bullet 2 is 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. So somebody just put something in the chat. Let's see. Joe Jean says, I like the order they are in on the slide. And Joe Jean, I'm going to take the slide down. Would you be willing to unmute? Are you able to unmute and say why you like that order? And it's open to anybody else. Also, Matthew has that pensive look on his face again. He's paying attention. He may want to say something too. We'll see. Antonio Ramirez says the order is fine. Maybe he'll have something to say too. Joe Jean, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. I like the order because fulfilling the reason why I'm at that job is to help that company be successful. You know, I've got the buy-in. That's the place I have agreed to be and perform in. So first, it's all kind of going to be a cycle. It's going to start with, I got to be healthy enough to help the agency be healthy.
Okay.
And if I have enough CEO weight, you know, and that's where I play most often, is in the CEO role. And so I'm more concerned, or mostly concerned about the agency being healthy and sustainable. And then I began to go through the rest of those. So it all kind of felt like it maybe it's a circle of influence. They all have to be together, but it looked in my world like that was the order of importance.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that. Matthew, Antonio, anybody else? Is there any reaction or any comment that you have about the order, about what seems most important to you? And I want to underline something that I heard Jogene say, and then we'll look at the chat too. But Jogene, and I don't think I misheard this, and if I did, tell me I did. But I think I heard you say, Jogene, that the health of the agency is related to your particular state, your state of well-being, and that those two things are very strongly connected. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's where it kind of feels like a circle. Those four things kind of you know, because it's all true.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much. Anybody else? You can pass. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I'm going to look at what a couple of people put in the chat. Matthew, you wrote in the chat too. I think it encompasses all the others. So it kind of, okay, it's the umbrella for all the others. Okay. Okay. Jogene, you like the order just fine. Antonio, yes, the order is fine. Alexine says 4. I think that managing our personal and professional well-being, this leads me to meeting the other 3 goals. So 4 is the priority, creating the possibility for the other 3. And you're getting a light bulb on that. Oh, Antonio's getting a light bulb, sorry, and a heart. Antonio writes, for supervisors and managers, compassion fatigue often develops quietly because competence hides it. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Antonio, but if you do, it did create a light bulb for some. Carl adds, I think the order will vary depending on the day or the circumstances. And Johnny writes, can you explain number 3 for me, please? Johnny, I'll do my best. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to invite anybody else to help me to explain number 3. But I'm going to bring it up so everybody can see it. Monitoring client engagement and growth. When I created these slides, Johnny, what that meant to me, and I'm very curious if it means the same to the other 46 people in our learning community. What that meant to me, and again, feel free to unmute and comment on this, is that part of the manager or the supervisor's job, part of their responsibilities is through individual supervision, through case note review, through observation, direct or indirect. They are also monitoring the engagement of clients and participants and the growth or the successes of clients and participants of the people they're supervising. So that's, to me, what it meant. And I'll give a concrete example. I used to supervise 40 mental health professionals who were all providing group services. I would get information from group participants about their experience, and I was responsible for monitoring and responding to that. And I would get feedback and information from the group leaders themselves, and then I would gain additional information in group supervision from them. And it was my responsibility to monitor their interactions with patients and clients, and for me to be aware of how patients and clients were experiencing their particular groups. So let's see if anybody, Antonio writes, competence doesn't prevent compassion fatigue. It postpones the visible consequences, and postponement increases the cost. Absolutely. If I knew how to put a light bulb next to that, I would. Johnny, did that explain number 3 for you from my perspective, or did I confuse it further? And would anybody be willing to help me out if that's what you understood, or if you understood something different for number 3? So we'll start with Johnny to see if that helped in any way. And Johnny, you by all means respond in the chat, or you're free to unmute if you're able to and want to. So, oh, okay. So Johnny says it did. Okay. Did anybody have a different understanding of number 3? Because that's ultimately what I intended. Andrea did not, I don't think. Okay, it looks like we're all kind of on the same page in regard to that. And if not, please say so. I think Dana may be writing something in the chat. I could be wrong. Dana's not writing anything in the chat. At least not to me. Okay. All right, excellent. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share my screen one more time. Keeping in mind that these are what our manager or supervisor goals. Some of you have indicated that you like the order of these. And again, I want to go back to what Alexine noted in the chat, that 4 would make it possible for her to do 1, 2, and 3. And again, people have different resonance with different ones of these. And Jojine also very clearly linked her well-being, her self-regulation, to give a nod to Antonio in terms of what he put on the table right away, as that being linked to the agency's mission and the program's or the department's mission and fulfilling that mission. So what I'd like to suggest, and we're now moving into this strategy that you may be engaging in already, and maybe there's not as formal a framework of it, but what I'm proposing is this idea of becoming aware of self. And I'd like to suggest that that is critical before interacting with somebody. And that may seem like a very, how can I put it? It may seem like a very basic or elemental statement or primary statement. My question is how many people actually do it before you're going to meet with someone you manage or before you supervise? How often do you say to yourself, self, how am I doing right now? What's going on with me right now? And I'm taking this down because I want to watch your faces as I pose this question. And I'm especially going to be watching Andrea when I say this. And she's not going to look now. It's okay. It's okay. My question is how many people, before they actually sit down with their supervisees, check in with themselves first? Paula maybe does. I don't know. I can't tell. Ebony does. Ebony, would you be willing to unmute and say a little bit about that?
So what I tend to do before I meet you, the question was before we meet with our supervisors, that was the question? Oh, when
or you meet with your supervisee if you have them.
Oh, yes. So what do I do is actually I'm supposed to meet with them like after this training. So
good. Very good.
So what I do is I have a checklist of things that I know I need to discuss with my staff. I make sure that there's like a clinical aspect to it. So of course, at one point in the beginning, I'll make sure to provide them with updates. Like the way I have it categorized is in the beginning, I'll provide my staff with updates. That's the first thing on my checklist.
Okay.
And the second thing would be any type of clinical things, like in terms of cases or case reviews or whatever. How I check in with myself, like mentally, is to make sure that I am prepared and everything on my task list is there. I also try to make sure to bring up something that they may have addressed with me previously. So that's also on my checklist as well. But that's the main thing that I do to prepare for my supervision.
Fantastic. Ebony, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the details of that. Paula, did you want to add anything to that for yourself? Nah? Okay. Okay. So you can if you want, but you know that. So Okay, something came in the chat too. If I know I have a meeting planned, I check in the morning of. Can you say a little more about that? Check in the morning of. With that person or with yourself?
With myself, because I thought the question was like, how often do we ask ourselves? So if I
Yeah.
know I have like a full schedule or just like a busy week, I try to check in the morning of like, okay, my day's gonna be busy.
Got
Today's
it.
really not the day to like slack on my self-care. Like make sure you eat breakfast before you leave the house because you have that 10 o'clock meeting, you don't want to be hangry. So stuff like that, I'll ask myself, like, make sure you're staying like as planned this week just to prevent stuff like that from happening later.
Fantastic. And again, you're looking at those basic elements. And again, I want to link that to what Antonio said about self-regulation. And clearly, Niraisha, you and I share the hangry, because if I don't eat, I can be a little bit short. So I ate before this learning community conversation. Yeah. So I'm going to ask us all to engage in a highly scientific experiment right at this particular moment. And whatever, Dana's like, yeah, scientific, I bet. Perhaps I'm stretching it a little far, Dana, but oh well. What I'm going to invite us all to do at this particular moment is to simply pause just a minute. Check in with yourself, where you are at this particular moment. How are you feeling? Do you have things on your mind? Just check in with yourself. And the question I'd like you to answer is from what you just found out. If I were your supervisee, would you be ready to meet with me? So from what you just found out about where you are right now, and I was your supervisee, if I had the pleasure of having you as a supervisor, would you be ready to meet with me right now? And there's no right answer here. It's just your answer right now. That's all. So Rainey says yes. So you can type in the chat, yes, no, unsure. And there's no right answer here. There's no right answer. It's just your answer. Antonio Ramirez says absolutely 100%. Some people, Emily is saying no, Candace is saying no. Dana's asking if we could move it to a different day. Fantastic. So Dana knows that right now, in this particular moment, it may be, and Johnny says unsure. Alexine says, I think so. Janet says, if it is not just a simple question, I always center myself first. Give me 3 minutes. So that's taking the time. Niraisha, you agree with that? The taking of take the time you need in order to be prepared to sit down. Okay. So I want to put that on the table as something to consider. Sanji says, unsure. Jaime says, agree. So I just want to put that on the table, is that you can check in with yourself moments before to say, how am I doing? What am I bringing to the table? What do I have to bring to the table? And you know what? You may need to do what Dana did. You know what? Can we reschedule? Today is maybe not the best day. And again, you don't want to get into the habit of that because that sends a message. So just keeping that in mind, folks, as the starting place. Are you in a place to be able to supervise or manage in the moment. And don't misunderstand me. I don't mean at the moment. I don't mean that, the person comes banging on your door and says, I need to talk right now, because that may be a different situation. I'm talking about, maybe as Dana referred to, we scheduled our supervision. It was on the calendar for both of us. And it's a little bit of an addition to what Ebony described, because what Ebony described was a beautiful plan of preparation, that you have your agenda ready, and hopefully, and I'm getting a little bit ahead, hopefully the supervisor has their agenda, the supervisee has their agenda ready too. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to share my screen. We'll go forward. So before the interaction, checking in with yourself. How are you doing right now? We just did that. And this is for you, Nirasia. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or hangry? A combination. And what is going on in my thoughts, my emotions, and my body at this particular moment? Is there something I need to do in that 3 minutes that I might need for myself? Maybe I have a quick snack. Maybe I get up and move around. Maybe I acknowledge that this is on my mind and I'm setting it aside because I'm going to be present and I'm going to be intentional with this particular person. So just throwing that out there is a simple part of a process that we can put in place before we meet. And what can I do to be ready for this interaction? In addition to that, as Ebony pointed out, being really prepared for supervision. And again, each one of us is going to provide supervision management in a way that's unique to us, hopefully unique to the needs of the supervisee. And, how do I feel ready and prepared to do this? And what I'd like to suggest that we want to bring to the managerial supervisory conversation is these 3 things. And again, I'm really reminded of that powerful example that Antonio gave us earlier. It's pretty hard for me to be curious if I've got something else on my mind, if I am experiencing compassion fatigue. So the state we want to try and be in is calm. Another way of saying that is self-regulated. We want to be calm. We want to be curious about what this person has to tell us, what may be important to them. And we also want to be compassionate. We want to be able to be compassionate even if we're maybe not so happy about the topic we may be focusing on. How can we still bring compassion to the moment? So I have to stop and see your faces and ask, and I'm going to watch the faces I can see, and those, unfortunately, that I can't see at this particular moment, maybe you can respond in the chat. Do you think it's fair, and do you think it's appropriate that a supervisee could expect or hope that you would be meeting with them and you would be calm, you would be curious about what they're telling you, and that you would treat them with compassion? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's I'm seeing nodding heads, yes, a fair and realistic expectation of Carl's giving lots of thumbs up. Okay. I wish I could do that, Carl. I can't. But, and okay, so people are responding in the chat as well. Let's see what people are responding. Jaime writes, of course. Ariel says absolutely. Paige says absolutely. And other expectations should be clear up front. Jogene says both fair and appropriate. I feel anything less would be a fail on my professional ability. Emily says, I'd ask for that to be the bare minimum. Okay. Wow. Okay. Emily, do you want to say anything about that? I loved the intensity of the way I read it, which maybe you didn't intend that in the writing, but I'm curious if you can, if you're able to unmute, you may not be able to.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Ah, we hear you great. Go right ahead.
Okay. I am not actually a supervisor. I am a supervisee, but I have been a supervisor in the past.
Sure.
And I think that those 3 C's are very fair to expect as the bare minimum, because generally as a supervisor, your supervisees are coming to you, especially depending on the role, with some pretty intense stuff, with their own personal things, with work things, whatever it might be. And I would like to ask for that to be the bare minimum. And if you're unable to, then of course, like, we're all human. I get that. But that's why, like, earlier in the chat, I had said, no, I would not, as a supervisor, be able to meet, because today isn't my day. I know that. I'm aware of it. Probably couldn't do that. And I don't know if I'd really be able to give those 3 C's to my supervisees today. On another day, yes.
Okay, but not today.
Probably not today.
Emily, before you remute, can I ask you just a quick question? Because as you were talking, and your clear commitment to, like, this is just the bottom line, okay? In addition to everything else you may be bringing to it as a supervisor, my question to you is how would you protect, as a supervisor, maintaining those 3 C's and not engaging in therapy?
I think it would have to just come from a lot of self-reflection, knowing myself and my staff the best, and knowing, because everybody has different expectations, personality types, caseloads. Yeah, so a lot of self-reflection. Yeah. Am I answering that kind of correctly?
Yes, because you're giving your answer. Absolutely. It's your answer, and it's 100% correct. And the way you said what you said really prompts me to want to add that, because I'm going to make a statement, and I'm very curious as to what your thought is about this, Emily. And please share your answer.
Okay.
And Carl just wrote something very interesting in the chat that we all have to really pay attention to. But I'm going to go so far as to say that professional management or supervision, clinical supervision, is not therapy.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Emily?
I would definitely agree. I would 100% agree, because there are things that I go and talk to my therapist about, but probably wouldn't bring to my supervisor.
Okay. Thank you. Emily, thanks so much.
Of course.
Yeah, great to hear your voice. Carl wrote in the chat, the B word, boundaries. And you may be a therapist. I'm confident that there are several, maybe more than several, clinical supervisors in this conversation right now. And I'm watching your faces to see. Matthew is one of them. Yeah. And Matthew, would you agree that supervision is not therapy?
100%.
And Matthew, if it's all right, can I also say, do you think it's possible, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but do you think it's possible that you could be calm, you could be curious, and you could be compassionate and still maintain boundaries?
Absolutely. And, it becomes about, while it's not therapy, it is the time that we engage in conversations about therapy. And we can use our own experiences as examples, and we provide support for each other. So it's a strange environment, because I am work friends with the people that I supervise, and I have a very healthy relationship with them. So, you know, I had one of the people I supervise come to me when her son died by suicide and or overdose or some combination of both, and completely melted into my arms. And I was there for her and supported her, and that has affected our relationship for the last couple of years since that happened. But she also got her real therapy outside of that. And so we maintained the B word, boundaries, very carefully. But it's a cordial and very loving relationship, in the same way that I may totally be there for and enjoy the patients that I see as a therapist. But it's a therapeutic relationship. It is not a real friendship or an outside friendship or relationship.
And it's also not supervision. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to link, Matthew, what you just said to something that Antonio said earlier in our learning community conversation, because these polar opposites could be present. I don't know about you. I'm going to be honest. I have not always liked everybody that I supervised. I haven't. And I still think I was able to be calm, curious, and compassionate. And I'll throw out maybe even more so because I knew how I felt about this person. So I had to work harder. So we still maintain the boundaries. Thank you, Carl. And we still bring that professionalism to it and the goals that we're trying to achieve. I'm going to share my screen. Johnny is asking, does it affect the performance? Johnny, can you say a little bit more what you mean by that? Whose performance?
So what I mean is, if you don't like the person, or say y'all don't have any chemistry, would it still affect your performance versus a person that you do kind of click with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm gonna just answer that honestly for myself, Johnny, and I have a feeling that would be different for everybody within our learning community. And I'm gonna frame it this way for Paul. And that is, I know 100% it would affect my performance. I also know 100% that person would get as good and as professional supervision as I was giving to somebody that I had chemistry with, or I liked, or I clicked with. Because I would hopefully be honest with myself about how I felt, and hopefully I would be engaging in self-reflection as to why I felt that way, which could be countertransferential or other reasons. And my hope is that I would not act that out in the managerial or supervisory conversations and interactions. So yes, Johnny, it would affect my performance, and I still think the quality of the supervision, guidance, management that person would get could be maintained. It would be very intentional and extremely self-aware on my part, because that's my responsibility to be that aware. Antonio writes, struggling doesn't mean you're failing. It often means you've been effective for too long without support. Yeah, thank you, Antonio. I'm going to share my screen again. And basically, I just want to share a couple of other framework elements that you can consider about conversation as you interact with supervisees. And then that will round out our 2 hours together. So I'm going to share my screen. This has already been talked about, but again, the slides make it acutely apparent, is this idea of the parallel process. And I am a believer, and you can consider this, believe it, not believe it, have a different reaction to it. I will throw out that this notion of how you interact, how you manage or supervise, you are actually modeling for the people you supervise, and they may do the same thing with their clients or patients. And again, I'm throwing that out there for people to consider. I would also say that there is a parallel process between, and again, we talked about this earlier, between the respect, the openness, and the collaboration that we may be able to co-create in a supervisory or managerial alliance, which again becomes the template of the depth at which that worker can possibly, with boundaries, professionally interact with that particular client, consumer, patient. So, true or false? You get to vote in the chat. Enhancing communication can reduce stress for managers, supervisors, and staff. Do you think that's true? Do you think it's false? Do you think you're unsure about whether it's true or false? And all answers are accepted and welcome. Okay, so far I'm seeing a lot of T's and a lot of trues. Again, whatever your answer is the right answer for you. And I'm just throwing this out on the table for consideration. Yep, I'm still seeing more truths. Okay, so to that end, with a focus on enhancing communication, I invite you to consider the process of asking permission and the intentional use of open-ended questions. And those of you who practice motivational interviewing will be like, hey, wait a minute. But remember, keep in mind that the use of these communication skills is not necessarily the practice of motivational interviewing. These are clear, available communication skills that we can intentionally employ in these conversations. And you can take a moment before you get to the agendas just to connect before the business. And again, if you're applying this through the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing, that would be the emphasis on engagement. I would also throw out, and Ebony, I loved how specific you were about your process. I would also throw out that we can be very clear to prioritize their agenda. That doesn't mean at the exclusion of our agenda, but what does it say to a supervisee if you say to them, what's at the top of your agenda? Let's start with that. And I'm curious if anybody wants to answer that question. If I'm your supervisor and I say to you, I'm just reading the chat. Yep, okay. I'm your supervisor and I say to you, come in for supervision, I greet you, we have a little bit of moment to connect before we get to the agendas, and I say to you, I'm wondering, what's on your agenda for this time for us to be together today? What do you want to start with? If I say that to you as your supervisor or your manager, and you can put this in the chat, what am I communicating to you? Do you believe? And remember, folks, this is all done, hopefully, with authenticity and genuineness. Rainey says, I love that! Exclamation point. Okay? My needs are being prioritized. My needs are valued. You have an interest. I am important. And please, Nyrasia, Matthew, Paula, Maria, Rainey, please, Andrea, democracy, my voice matters. Please confirm in the chat that I did not pay you to write that in the chat. I'm just, posing the question. Please do confirm that I did not speak to you before, nor am I paying you to write that in the chat. Again, the permission. Would it be okay if I asked you a few questions about work? And again, these are just basic open-ended questions. But again, the essence is the permission. prioritizing their agenda, and the openness. When you think about your work, what's going well? What do you feel good about? That is starting with a strengths-based perspective. When you think about your work, what are the challenges, difficulties, growth opportunities you're experiencing? And again, this is about reframing, starting with strengths and then moving into growth opportunities, not problems, not deficits. And frankly, they may be problems and deficits, but it's about how we frame them. Go ahead. Yeah, did somebody want to?
Lid open like you live by yourself, you nasty fuck.
Oh,
Go in there with my teeth, not go in there looking.
somebody's unmuted. Okay, please mute yourselves. Thank you. Okay, I hope that works out. All right. So, true or false? Yet again, feeling heard and understood decreases stress. Do you think that's true or false? Okay, so it looks like a number of people are writing true. Alexine also inviting the person into the process by prioritizing their agenda. Okay, so keeping that in mind, folks, as we start to bring this conversation to a conclusion in the last few minutes, we can engage in active listening. We can give the person a space to be heard and uninterrupted. We can reflect what they said before we give questions. We can also summarize what they said before the next question. And during their time of talking uninterrupted, we can be present because hopefully we've self-regulated before we're meeting with them. We can be attentive and we can communicate to them through our nonverbal behavior that they actually have our attention. And afterwards, a summary, there can be 3 powerful questions. And again, folks, these skills are not exclusive to any one evidence-based practice. You can say to somebody after you offer them a summary of what they said, did I get that right? Did I leave anything out? Is there anything you'd like to add? And again, think about what that communicates. That communicates, I'm trying to understand you, I'm listening to you, and I want to get it right. I have completely stolen this from motivational interviewing, but what I think is relevant in regard to this is we can engage in collaborative partnerships. We can verbally affirm somebody's strengths and efforts. We can offer respect and compassion and try and see it from their perspective. And we can invite a person, we can listen to them, we can empower their ideas and offer insights and action. And I am referring to that in regard to this learning community as getting yourself into the PACE zone. We, of course, can maintain our professional boundaries. They're for us as well as for them. If we're under stress and we're not self-regulated, our boundaries can erode, and we want to be very clear about that. And this idea of support expectations, about clarity, accountability, that we will always offer respect, support, and hopefully compassion. And we're very clear about the limitations of this managerial or supervisory conversation. It's not therapy, as we said before, and we can help people to link to resources if they need therapy. We do not want to act out our stress. That is why the self-awareness, the being clear about where we are, can be really helpful. We also want to get real about how we feel. How do we really feel about this person? And what is it that, we want to be attentive to communicating to them? And I want to repeat and repeat in writing. It is possible to offer respect and compassion, even if we don't like someone that we manage or supervise. And again, I'm thinking of Antonio Ramirez as I say this. That is a practice. We can learn how to professionally do that. And we can grow those particular skills. And again, if we have a grudge against somebody, if they're making our life difficult, if we feel that they're making our life difficult, we can be reflective about that and we can do whatever we can do to resolve it. And we want to remember those 3 C's. Calm, we're calm. Curious, we're curious, even if we have that grudge. And we can offer compassion. And again, don't misunderstand me, folks. This is not easy. These things require a lot of work. They require a lot of energy, and they are doable. And we can focus on people's strengths as a way of not acting out our stress. And we can also have empathy, because think about it, folks. I believe it was Antonio who said, you know, I supervise people and I have a boss, which means Antonio as a supervisor. There can be stress involved from the supervisee's perspective. There can be stress there, and we can have empathy in regard to that. And we can intentionally bring our 3 C's: calm, curiosity, compassion to the moment. And we want to grow toward that pace zone, the partnership, the acceptance, the compassion, and the empowerment in the supervisory conversation. So keep in mind, if your plan isn't working, if the way you're interacting isn't working with somebody, be aware of that and know if stress is building up in regard to that. And meaning your self-care, your wellness plan, your personal self-care wellness plan. And if you're realizing that it's not working, you can acknowledge that. You can acknowledge that it can have a negative impact on your work and your relationships, personal as well as professional, and that you can act to adjust. You can talk through, you can get what you need to manage and reestablish your balance. Your balance. And remember, folks, just checking the chat quickly. Marietta writes, do no harm goes both ways, staff and the people we serve. Absolutely, Marietta. Because we're trying to create an environment where harm is not happening to anybody. And that includes you. These are these basic evidence-based strategies. I just wanted to include them in this kind of list. There probably are many others that are relevant to you and your experience and your needs. The combination, if any of these or others, is absolutely your choice. And the final thing I want to say before I say thank you so much, I really appreciate this opportunity, is remember, folks, your wellness, your well-being is not so much a static state. It's really a series of actions. So yes, you may feel a sense of self-regulation, but don't lose sight of what you did in order to create that state. It doesn't just miraculously appear. Before I show you the last slide, I want to see your faces one more time. And I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. It's really been an honor. Candace, the slides will be available to you. Once we get your completed evaluation, we'll send you a copy of the slides as well as your certificate for 2 hours. Okay? So you'll get those, Candace. Folks, what a pleasure. I hope to see you again sometime in the future. Please take good care. I wish you, wherever you may be, a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, everybody.